Good evening from Vietnam. Thanks a lot for spending your morning joining our show and share your stories with our global audience. And on behalf of our listeners around the world, I want to say thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you, huh?
Hey, since you haven't been to my beautiful country, please accept our invitation. So next time if you and your family travel to Vietnam, please let us know. We'll be so delighted to take you guys around town, okay?
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
And in our culture, it's a great honor if we can have you to do a little introduction about who you are and the works that you do. Please do that.
Yes, of course. My name is Matt Poepsel, and I'm calling in today from the lovely Cape Cod, Massachusetts, which is on the east coast of the United States. And I've enjoyed my adult working career, starting in military service, all the way through to becoming a software product manager, which I built software products in Boston for the past 20 plus years. And also got my PhD in psychology along the way, because I really am totally focused on helping people have better experiences at work. I think we know so much about the nature of work and the nature of human experience that we can be doing a much better job than we are. So I enjoy helping companies today really make sure that every employee is having the highest levels of performance and great experiences at work. And so today I'm just really excited to be able to chat with you and explore a little bit of my own personal history, but also my vision for what I see as a truly enlightened workplace of the future.
Beautiful. You have a phenomenal career, path, but you share with us in less than 90 seconds. So we need to dive in deeper. We need to understand a lot more about that. Is that okay?
Oh yes, absolutely.
All right, and I would like to invite you to the journey of travel in time. So let's travel to when we were really, really young. So when I was a little boy, I always wanted to become an astronaut. And going to different planets seemed so cool, but life didn't give me any chance to do anything close to what I wanted to become. So Matt, when you were a young boy, what was your dream about yourself in the future though?
One of my earliest memories about a future career I recall was being a professional baseball player. I thought that might be something I would like. I enjoyed playing baseball. I just had a natural love for the game. Did not realize that I would stop growing relatively early in life. So, and I was a pretty good hitter, but there was no chance that I was really going to become a professional baseball player. But I remember I was saying that I was trying to convince my mother that I was going to be a professional baseball player. There was just no question about it. And that didn't quite pan out for me either.
So how was the next dream about the future, after professional baseball player?
Yeah, the next earliest memory I had was probably around fifth grade when I was coming up in elementary education. But I had a little bit of experience, I suppose. But I had decided at that point that I wanted to be in the military. I wanted to be in the U.S. Marine Corps specifically. There was something about it. I said of all the military services, it seemed like a very proud thing to do to serve your country. And I said, well, what's the toughest branch of the service? And the Marines were the toughest. And I said, well, that's what I'm going to do. And then turned out it would be many years later before I would actually make that dream a reality, but that one actually stuck.
At fifth grade?
Fifth grade, I knew. Yeah, I didn't know exactly a lot of what military service was like, but I felt that calling, and it took quite a bit of time before I was old enough to really join and to apply myself. But yeah, it was in there very early for me.
So fifth grade, you were about 10, 11 years old, and life is full of joy and full of adventures out there. So why military that that ignite the interest inside of you?
Yeah, I've always been very goal oriented, and I think I had something to prove to myself and probably to the outside world as well. I just really felt this sense of duty and honor, and I really just liked the structure of the military environment. And as I looked at all the different branches of service, it just really was something that resonated with me to think of myself earning the title of becoming a Marine.
And then from the time you serve in the army, moving to the corporate world, what made you leave the military world and go into the business world and help people in a different way, though?
Such a great question. So once I got into the service, I was very happy to have joined, and I was going through and realizing that I was going to be, I guess while I was in the military, something changed for me, and I was like, there's no real room for individual advancement. I was an enlisted person, and so there were very specific rules about when you could be promoted, and they had a lot of control, obviously, which they need to have over your life and your career and where they send you for duty stations and everything. So I had an individualistic streak in me the whole time, and it finally got to the point where I was like, well, I know that I'm going to be getting out. About a year before I got out of the service, though, I had recognized that I didn't have any college education. And so I was like, I'm going to be a 27-year-old freshman in college. That's not going to work for me. So I had to catch up with life, basically. So what I did was I started taking a bunch of tests and taking courses and just jamming as much as I could. And I finished my bachelor's degree in psychology the same month that I separated from military service. And that allowed me to go on to graduate school and translate sort of by developing skills. I got a master's in business administration and in information systems. So that helped me to make the transition from military service to corporate life. And I took my first job as a product manager at a small startup in Boston. And I thought that was just the greatest thing, to be able to use my natural affinity for business and for technology, and to use some of my military discipline and what I had learned about leadership to show up day one on the job as my first real adult civilian job.
Wow. Matt, I want to bring you to the moment that a year before you you decided to leave the military, right? You decided to go to take a lot of tests and go to college and finish your bachelor degree. And I think that is the bachelor degree in psychology, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
All right. At that moment, you sat in front of a lot of choices, a lot of different degree majors and stuff. Why psychology?
Yeah, when I was on one of my deployments, we were headed over to Somalia. The U.S. warships take 10 days to cross the Atlantic, so we had a lot of time. You couldn't go anywhere. You're stuck on a ship just basically traversing the Atlantic Ocean. So I went to the ship's library looking for some books, and I ended up picking two books that are nonfiction books that just kind of appealed to me for some reason that I didn't really understand at the time. One was a general psychology book. And I was fascinated reading about all we know about perception and developmental psychology and cognitive psychology and all these kinds of things. And it was just fascinating to me how much we know about the mind and how much the brain-mind connection and everything is just awesome. But the second book was a book called In Search of Excellence, and it was all about businesses that had really reached the next level. And it was written by Tom Peters, who went on to write a bunch of stuff. A couple of McKinsey consultants had studied basically highly effective organizations and what helped them to achieve their success. And I thought, well, that's interesting too. We can kind of crack the code on successful people and successful businesses. So when I was trying to decide what to study, I said, well, psychology is my passion. I just was fascinated by it. So that became my degree. But when I was trying to find a job, like as a civilian, I was planning out my civilian career, I thought, well, I don't really want to be a psychologist per se, because I'm still interested, so I went the business route. So it's still at the intersection of those two passions of mine that I found that sort of transition.
And why did you decide to go all the way to get your PhD in psychology after successful in business world? Huh?
Yeah, so when I joined the business world and I'm working on these highly technical products, it was interesting to me, but I didn't have a lot of passion for the nature of the products we were building. But I was fascinated by the people around me. So people at every socioeconomic level, every line of work, every background would struggle with something at work. And my heart would break for people as they would have these trials and tribulations and issues and friction, conflict with one another. Team dynamic wasn't, what it needed to be, cultural shifts, like all this stuff. So I decided I want to have an opportunity to bring more psychology into my work. And I remember the moment I was taking a flight to go to Chicago to support one of our salespeople on a sales call. And I'm sitting on the plane, and we haven't taken off yet. And I had just been to the airport's bookstore, and I bought a book called Masters of Success. And it was all about the psychology of personal development. And I was like, I can't wait for the plane to take off so I can start reading this book. And I thought, wait a minute, what if this was my work? What if helping people at work be successful was my job? What if that was the nature of the products that I built? And it was like, could that really be a thing? So I didn't know what that might look like. So when I went online and I said, well, I've already got 2 master's degrees in technical areas, but I want to go back to psychology. So that meant for me a PhD. At the time, when I looked, there was only one program that was giving a PhD in an online format because I already had young kids. I'm working a full-time job. I didn't have the flexibility that some people might have. So I enrolled immediately in that program, and it took 6 years for me to finish all my coursework and my dissertation. But by getting my PhD in psychology, I was able to sort of reintroduce psychology into my work. Studying the PhD level and reintroducing psychology into the work I was already doing with business and with technology, it really helped me to kind of unify a lot of my passions and interests all in one place.
Matt, in our culture, we believe in something that's already planned for something that calls fate. So on the trip on the dispatch trip, to Somalia, you book. And you basically pick out 2 books that one is in psychology, one is in business, and that ignite the interest inside of you, and that set course for the next path that you have. So have you ever asked yourself why did you pick those 2 books, and what if you pick another books that could lead you to a different path totally though?
Yeah, I think that I hadn't thought about it a lot when I was in the middle of having young family and working. And I would say that more recently, as I've started to study philosophy and think a little bit more about life at a deeper level, then those types of questions have come to the forefront. And now I believe that I wouldn't have possibly chosen other books than the ones I have chosen, because those seeds were within me, right? Maybe I didn't recognize them, but there was a reason that I was drawn to those 2 books, something innate in me. And I think that helped me understand why, I had chosen those books versus some others. I've read and chosen hundreds of books in lots of different fields that have not sparked the same joyous energy in me that those 2 topics did.
Because a lot of people also reading books, and a lot of books also somewhat ignite the interest inside of them, but they couldn't make it happen to become a career or something for them. So tell us how you feel exactly when you read those 2 books that you say, okay, it's ignite the dreams inside of you out.
Yeah, I think that when you think about the causes and conditions that allow certain things to manifest, for me, what happened was there was this natural energy that I recognized. I could feel it, I could feel it in my body, how I felt and how energized. I could feel the energy coursing through me whenever I would be exposed to these topics of let's talk about psychology or let's talk about business problems. And so because I could feel it in my body, I knew that there was a natural energy, something bigger than myself, that was flowing through me. So I started to honor that energy, follow that energy, and that's something I try to do to this very day.
So respond to those energies and trying to find the answer with that, right?
Exactly right.
So on your trip to Chicago, my coach always told me, my mentor actually always told me this: there's opportunities go right by in front of us at every moment, and it's how we can catch them on time will make or break the opportunities for us. So at that moment, you pick another book, and you starting to say, okay, what if you becoming a person? What if it's going to be a career for you? All right. So why did you ask yourself that question back then, though?
Yeah, I think there was a level of dissatisfaction with my current work. I think I'd done it by then I'd probably been doing it for 5 or 7 years. And again, it's not that I didn't enjoy it. It's just that I didn't feel complete. I felt something was missing. I felt there was a dimension of my values that was not being honored. And that value, as I would come to learn later, was this deep sense of service, a willingness and an interest in helping other people through my work. And that wasn't happening in that job. It might have been happening locally for my team around me, but my influence and my ability to help other people was somewhat limited based on the nature of that specific product. So where I liked building software products in that case, I didn't necessarily like building them for non-humanistic outcomes. So that led me to go back and try to figure out how can I reintroduce psychology and still not abandoned my interest in business and technology. So for me, it became an integration of more of myself and my interests that was the answer that I was seeking.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I'm inspired by the passion that you are having for yourself to make greater impacts on people's life, make them get better. So your role as a vice president and the godfather of talent optimization at the predictive index. What exactly the predictive index is? Can you share with us?
Yeah, so the Predictive Index was a company that was created in 1955, a long time ago, when there was the founder of the company created basically a personality assessment, but it's specific to work. So he became very interested, his name was Arnold Daniels, and he became very interested at the time why some people would succeed in certain jobs and other people wouldn't. And so he developed this assessment to say, well, what is it that we experience in terms of our drives, our psychological traits, the needs that we experience that we want to satisfy through our work. And the more we can understand about the person and the more we understand about the job, we can do a better job of selecting people for the right work, but also coaching, developing them, helping them become better leaders in a more natural way. So that was very inspiring to me. So when I got exposed to the assessment itself in 2007, then I was really impressed with it. In 2013, I had the chance to join the company. So 10 years ago, I joined the Predictive Index and I became their only product manager. So now this was really the first time I was able to unify my interest in psychology, my service of trying to help people get better at work, the business side of things, as well as the technology because of the nature of the software products we were building to help with coaching and development, for example. So I was like, wow, this is now everything has finally come together. And 10 years later, this is what I still enjoy most about my work is being able to create better workplace experiences for people using a combination of business, technology, science, like all these things all in one tidy package.
Beautiful. So if the audience from this part of the world wanna experience the predictive index and how they can get user assessment to help themselves getting better and getting the workforce better, what the baby steps do they need to do and where they can find the information?
Yeah, I would go to predictiveindex.com. It's the company's main website. We have certified partners of ours that operate all over the world. And I've been to China on business. I've been worked with a lot of different folks around the world, throughout Europe, throughout Asia. And it's a global assessment for sure. We do millions of assessments a year. So I think if you want to experience the output of the Predictive Index for yourself, predictiveindex.com. It's a great place to go.
Got it. And I would love to explore that. Matt, when I listen to what you share, you constantly keep exploring opportunities for yourself to grow and continue adding more values to the lives of others. So what message are you telling yourself every day so that you can, we can withhold all the challenges that life throw at you and continue that path though?
Yeah, I try to be a couple things. One is that I do believe, as you said, every day presents a unique opportunity for us to work. And so every day that we wake up, we have this opportunity. It's questions, what will we do with it? For me, it has helped to be tremendously mission driven. I would say that based on the experiences I've had since the pandemic, where I went through some significant challenges, I became more clear about my mission. And so my mission today is to help leaders liberate themselves from outdated attitudes and beliefs. I feel like there's so much that holds us back. That mission is the right mission for me. It's not going to be the right mission for every one of your audience members, of course. But I think once you have a mission, whatever your personal mission is, when you draw energy and direction from that mission, it makes it easier when you wake up every morning to say, first of all, hey, look at that. I woke up. That's pretty great. What am I going to do today? What am I going to do to pursue that mission? And then all of a sudden you can look at those opportunities and say, some may pan out, some may not. But as long as you're breathing, you've got this opportunity to, pursue that mission of yours.
You mentioned the words outdated belief from, many leaders out there. What do you mean by outdated ones, though?
Yeah, when we think about the world of work, it has changed dramatically. I mean, and I'm not even talking about just since the pandemic. I mean, if you go all the way back, when you think how humans first started to work, Vietnam, you have such a rich culture. You have so much history. You go back thousands of years. People worked, right, to be able to provide food and safety for their family. Pretty simple. Well, then there was a massive industrial revolution later after an agrarian society, and then we started to do a knowledge economy. So now a lot of white collar jobs and collaboration, et cetera. And work is continuing to evolve. I mean, look at what's happened since the pandemic. Highly distributed, highly collaborative. Well, from worker perspective, we've evolved too. Our relationship with work is not what it used to be. We work for so much more than putting food on the table in most developed nations. We're now looking for meaning at work. We want relationships with others. We want to feel purpose and these types of things. But what changes have happened in leadership recently? What evolution has there been in our leadership techniques and approaches? And I think that's where I say outdated. It's because what passes for leadership in many people's minds are techniques that were created in the 50s and 60s at best. So when I talk about outdated, it's like me first. I'm the leader. I'm out in front. It's my decisions and my contribution that matters the most. Outdated, right? My behaviors. I'm going to make the decisions and I'm going to tell you because it's command and control and this is the way that I get quality outputs. Outdated. So when you go to business schools today, so I had the chance to go to Harvard Business School and I had a great time there. But the reality is in most business school programs, we focus so much on technology and operations and process and these things, but we don't talk enough about the people management and the people leadership. And that's where I feel like what we're putting into our leaders' brains is a more of a mechanistic approach to business when I think we need a more humanistic approach to business.
Matt, since when I first started my professional career, I always heard the term people first and people as our, graded assets and everything. But it turns out that organizations and leaders didn't honor those kind of motto, right? So what happened to organizations that, instead of really people first when they want to make, the financial performance, then people actually let go first to make the bottom line. What happened to organizations today?
The short answer to your question, is fear. It's fear. If you think about why do we have to make a certain number? Well, I'm afraid that if we don't, I might lose my job. Well, why do I have to act in a certain way? If I'm afraid that if I act in a people first way, the job won't get done. It's always fear. And I think that so much of our historic wiring in our brains is survival. Right? So we have this really strong survival instinct, but how much of a threat are we under? For the average person going to work, tigers aren't going to eat them, but the brain is still overactive, and so we look for the next threat. And so what we find is that fear drives our attention inward, me, my issues. What percentage of the day does the average leader think about their own issues in their mind versus the mission or versus the people around them? So we have to work hard to overcome that fear and really be other-centric and be mission-driven as opposed to being self-interested. And that's hard. It takes a lot of unlearning. It takes a lot of awareness and courage to move away from fear, toward the interest of others.
Beautiful. Hey, I want to talk about your book at the moment. I want to say congratulations on that. I've been interviewing a lot of executives around the world, and one of the things that they share commonly found in our conversation is they always wanted to write a book by themselves and sharing their stories, their experience, and to leave the legacy back for what they've been doing well, right? And then you've been having a lifelong, path of servicing others, trying to expand your impact to more people as possible. And I think that your book is the next level, take it to the next level of impact, because now it can reach to million people, million readers around the world and cross continents, right? Also, so tell us, why did you decided to write your book and when?
Yeah, so this would have been February of last year. I had a guest on my podcast. I have a podcast called Lead the People, and I interview just different types of people about angles that they have on leadership. And I had somebody on the program who had written a book and didn't seem to be like a classic definition of a writer. this is an entrepreneur, a person who had invented a product and was selling it to fire departments and things, but had written a book. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I might want to write a book someday. And he said, oh, you could absolutely write a book. Do it with a program that I found that had spun out of Georgetown University, where there's a group of authors, first-time authors, who get together and write as a cohort, like together. So they're all working on their own nonfiction books, but they're going through the learning process of how to write a book with support from one another and from the curriculum. And I thought, well, that sounds pretty interesting. That was a conversation I had with him on a Friday. Saturday morning, I looked up the program. I'm like, oh, I'm doing this. Monday morning, I signed up first thing. Very first slot, 9 a.m. I was like, I'm in. And that was February of last year. And the book came out a year and a month later. So it was a pretty fast process to write the book and prepare it, manuscript, get it all produced and everything. So that's how that went down. Yeah.
So Friday, you talked to the gentleman. Saturday, you looked out for the information. And Monday, you're in the cohort together with in the program. And the book came out in about 13 months, right? That's very,
about 13 months. 13 months.
Very, very fast in terms of, writing and publishing. Where did you have an idea? Because I think a lot of issue first coming from forming an idea of what to write, right? So how did you come up with the ideas to write that book?
Yeah, so I had completely burned out. It was terrible. It was terrible. So during the pandemic, I had this massive reprioritization, like many people did, of our priorities. We're going to work, but you were faced with your own mortality in the sense of this global pandemic. Nobody knew what was going to happen. At the same time, I'm having a midlife crisis because I'm 50 some odd years old. I'm 50 years old at that time, which is a terrible idea to have a midlife crisis in the middle of a global pandemic. I wouldn't recommend it. But all these things were happening, and I'm having this rejuggling of my priorities. And I started to question not just, why do I work wherever I work or do whatever work I was doing? It's why do I work, period? Like, what role does work play in my life? And I recognized that I wasn't showing up as the leader who I wanted to be. And that was unacceptable. So for me, I was sitting here thinking about, like, how am I going to find my way through this? And so what I did was I went back to my military roots and I started to try to fight my way through it. It didn't work. So I went back to my scholarly roots in my PhD program. I tried to study my way out of it, and that didn't work either. And then my father got a call from his oncologist, and he was diagnosed as having a cancerous tumor on his kidney that would have to be removed. And he would go through this lengthy recovery process. And I was like, oh my, that's right. We know how this movie ends. Right? We know that our time here is finite. Yeah. So I went to my bookshelf, and I picked out a book that I hadn't seen in 15 years. And it was called The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. And I thought, I've got to pick up my meditation practice again. It's been more than 15 years since I had sat on a cushion and really just found my ground, if you will. So I'm studying Buddhist techniques, Tibetan Buddhist meditation techniques, and I'm sitting on the cushion, and I suck at meditation, so I'm thinking about work. And there's a practice that they have that's known as metta meditation, where you wish wellness and peace for yourself, and then can you go out to, like, your spouse, maybe your kids? Can you go further out to maybe your coworkers? Can you push even further and experience compassion for a stranger, or maybe an enemy? Can you push that even further to all beings in the universe? And I thought, oh my gosh, this is exactly how I've approached my leadership journey. I had to learn to lead myself before I could lead others, before I could expand that circle out to leading teams, an organization, and finally leading out into the world. So to me, the framework became immediately clear. And so my job there was, how can I use Buddhist meditation and Buddhist philosophy and bring that into my leadership to move beyond being a warrior and move beyond being a scholar to becoming a sage, but also integrating all three of those together. That became my mission. And the more successfully I was able to do that, the lighter I became, the more energy flowed naturally through me, the more effective I was at creating relationships and moving out of fear and to a place of compassion and wisdom. Because here in the West, I'm into some pretty Eastern stuff right now, and they're like, too bad. And I said, okay, then we're doing this.
Wow. Hey, Matt, your turning moments in life happen to be every moment like that is when you pick up a book and that gave you the like you book when I note
Another
down
book.
here it's like you pick the book and then you just realize that okay you needed to change you need to reshape and you need to you figure out your passion in life again and did you ask yourself about that coincidence.
No, I've never made that connection before. That it
Ah.
was two books in the ship's library. It was another book later.
Uh-huh.
No, I always have, I definitely have read a lot of books, hundreds and hundreds of books. I love books. I love audiobooks. I love ebooks. I love them all.
Ah.
But many of them, I didn't even finish, because you
Mm.
start them and you're like, eh. And others are like life changing. But I've never made the connection that you just made, which is like major turning points in my life,
Yeah.
started from books.
Yeah. So for the book that you write, expand the circle, right? Who's the target
Mhm.
audience, and what is that they will benefit from reading your book, though?
Yeah, and even before I answer, now you've got my mind racing, because could there be a time when somebody has my book and it becomes their turning point?
Mhm.
Whoa, that would be something. But I'll answer your question, which is the book is primarily written for aspiring leaders. So anyone who's either wants to be more confident in their leadership, maybe manage people for the first time. That's kind of the classic definition of leadership, although it's not my definition. That's how some people feel.
Mm.
That would be good. Or if you are that first time leader and you're like, I'm trying to figure out how to get comfortable in my skin here as a leader. Or if you've hit a plateau and you're like, I'm just not showing up, like what happened to me, right? I'm
Mm.
not showing up as the leader I want to be, or I got passed over for a promotion, what's holding me back? That's the primary audience. And so the book lays out the framework along that sort of Buddhist inspired expanding circles, but it also brings in Western psychology studies and
Ah.
research to help prove the effectiveness of techniques in the workplace, like empathy, like psychological safety, like wellness, employee wellness. These types of things all were inspired by the. So you can figure out, where am I doing well and where do I need to focus?
Mm.
But I also included exercises, things you can do to actually develop your capabilities aligned with the framework. So it's a partially inspiring, but it's also a how-to book in terms of actually making progress on your path. So it was really important to me to lay out the path for the
Mm.
reader, but also to give them the exercises to make progress along that path. It's not just a theoretical book. It's about rolling up our sleeves and getting to work. That's the primary audience for the book.
That's definitely a book that I want to read and I want to share with my friends. So I will connect with you on separate notes if you can send a few copies and sign for me to
Yeah,
my home in Lafayette, California, and then
I would be
I'll ship it
honored.
to Vietnam. Okay, so because I really like the book with a roadmap so that we know exactly from point A to point Z. Along the way, we have to then the technique, the practices that can help us to embed the concept into the learning. So that would be wonderful. If you can pick one chapter, and I know this question is not fair for you, but if you only can pick one chapter to share with our audience today, what
Yeah.
would that chapter be and why?
I think for most leaders who I meet, the very first chapter about lead yourself is the logical place to start.
Oh.
Because I think that it includes, and I'll share with you very briefly the 5 elements that show up in that specific portion of the book. So the first thing when I'm teaching leaders that how to lead yourself, I make the case that before we can lead others effectively, we have to learn to lead ourselves.
Mm.
So, and that resonates with people. They're like, that makes sense. Okay, great. So how do I do that? And I say, well, okay, so the first one is awareness. We have to have self-awareness. Where we don't have awareness, we can't understand where we may not be showing up as the leaders we want,
Mm.
and we can't do anything to improve that, right? So awareness is really important. And at this point, leaders go, yeah, that makes sense. I
Mm.
understand. Okay. And then the second is self-acceptance.
Mm.
And they say, what? What? Well, all those things that you aren't so proud of, all those failures and challenges you've had in your life, all those perceived negatives that you kind of wish and work really hard to hide away.
Mm.
You have to make peace with those things. And at that point, leaders are like, this is a very different approach.
Ah.
We never talk about this. But the reality is, the more you embrace your imperfections and the bad things that have happened to you, it doesn't make you vulnerable. It makes you relatable. There's power in our deficits. I know thousands of leaders. I've never met a perfect leader. But the most effective leaders, find a way to bring those perceived negatives into their leadership, to recognize their limitations, and to not hide them away and pretend they don't exist, but to incorporate them. And I feel like this is a really important step that we overlook. So when you start to have this negative mind swirl around, oh, I screwed up that email, it was so badly written, and you have to learn to give yourself some grace and compassion. Leadership is not easy. So self-acceptance is a recognition that you're not perfect. You're not going to do everything perfectly. But those aren't flaws that prevent you from being capable as a leader. They're actually fuel for your holistic leadership approach.
Yeah.
And so I've at this point now, I've got people's attention because they're like, I'm definitely not doing that yet. Well, then we move into confidence. What is it that allows us to show up as confident leaders? I know so few leaders who are like, I'm extremely confident in my leadership approach. Doesn't happen. Why not? Why not? So I talk in the book about how to find that self-confidence. Then I move into authenticity. How do you not just show up truly as yourself, but fully as yourself? If you have a great sense of humor and you don't use that in your leadership, you're not complete. You have to find ways to bring that in, right? And feel comfortable doing so. And then the last one, the fifth one that I share in that chapter, the very last one, is the biggest bait and switch in the history of leadership. It's transcendence. It's that you have to recognize that it's not all about you. You have to be willing to transition your leadership mindset and approach and energy outside of yourself and get ready to make room for everyone else.
Wow. Beautiful.
Yeah, so that's a chapter I think is, you're right, it's hard to pick a favorite, but I think that's a great starting point to get people in the mindset of what it really takes to embrace what I call an enlightened leadership approach.
Beautiful, beautiful. Like you said earlier, a lot of leaders, a lot of organizations fail to do so because of fear, right? So if they can accept in, be awareness of who they are, self-acceptance, and then they start to remove the fears and embrace the newness into their leadership, principle. Well, I have two last questions for this beautiful conversation today. Okay, Matt?
Yes, of course.
I really like the way you think and the passion that you have in people to get better. And my wife and I, we are on the passion to help people to improve their ability to think, because we believe that if we start to change through first by having the right kind of thinking, then then we can head into a positive change at a later, on a later path. So how have you been growing your ability to think over the years?
Yes, I think that when I go back and I think about the studies that I did, I mentioned to you I've been an avid reader for as long as I can remember. I had a trunk full of audiobooks back when I was first getting started many, many years ago. And I never really stopped, just consuming as much as I could. And now today that takes the form of books and articles and blog posts and Substack and Reddit and anything I can get my hands on. But I would say that there was a time when my reading was much more technical. I was reading about the strategy and technology and process and operations in these things. I was reading business books, trying to round out my technical abilities. But more recently, I've started to balance that. I still read those things to stay current, but I do a lot more philosophical reading outside of the business literature and find ways to bring them in. So every morning I have a practice. I wake up early. I wake up about 4:30 a.m. my local time, and I immediately sit down and I read from either scriptures or text or ancient philosophical works about the structure of the universe or the nature of reasoning or our relationship with ourselves or the nature of fear, or whatever it might be. And I don't read for very long. It's probably about 20 minutes, but it's enough to give me perspective for the rest of my day. I follow that up with 20 minutes of meditation, and I follow that up with a good workout, ideally. And that helps me say that, for an hour or so of time, I've already, accomplished 3 of my important mantras: body like stone, mind like water, spirit like sky. Those are the 3 things I want to channel in my life. And so for me, when the morning is early and have good energy, those are the things that I like to do. So the nature of what I read and how it has affected my thinking has really expanded my mindset, so that I notice things I didn't notice before, and I've slowed down enough. And I think my thinking has benefited from both space and the nature of what I'm stuffing into my brain.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. The next question is about time traveling again. So we travel to the past. We figured out that you want to become a professional baseball, right? And then move into the military ambitions at 5th grade, and then eventually life take you to different turns to what you are doing amazingly right now. And congratulations for continue to expand your impact, because that is the dream inside of you, and the world needs a lot of people like you to make the world a better place for everybody. Let's travel to the future. Is there anything exciting that you are working on and you want to share with me, with the audience, so that we can celebrate with Matt all together now in advance?
Yeah, in the short-term future, I'm starting to do a lot more speaking and provide workshops and things, and work more closely with people, audiences, participants, and start to get hands-on with some of the material and the insights that I've had at this stage of my career, which I really enjoy. Beyond that, I think I'm in the learning mode, to be honest, what people need. So for example, for your listeners, as they're sitting here thinking, is it that the path isn't clear? Is it that the progress along a path is what's missing? Is it a need for community of other like-minded people? Is it more specific coaching opportunities? I don't really know. So I know that the future for me will be identifying where can I be of greatest and highest service? How can I continue to translate philosophical principles and my limitless hope for humanity through work? But I can't say that I know with clarity what that looks like, and I think that's delightful, because I don't need all the answers right now, huh? I don't.
Yeah. Wow. Just few hours ago, I shared my weekly newsletter, and I talk about embracing the unplanned things, right? And we don't know how life will turn out to be. But, as long, like you say, keep doing your best, keep raising the bars, but and also keep open for learning, because that is where all the hidden opportunities will come. So Matt, thanks a lot for having this beautiful conversation, have a beautiful chance for us to knowing you and having you to our program. And I really look forward to a day that we could meet, and that I can have, introduce you to our amazing group of people over here in this part of the world. Also want to contribute that part to make, the world a better place for everybody. And well, I'd love to see you in person one day soon. Before I let you go off the show, is that okay if I ask you one last question?
Of course.
And that is about your father, because I didn't know how to ask in those, in those situations. Is really sensitive for me to ask the kind of question, but I want to ask, how is he now?
Yeah, thankfully he's doing very well. He's recovered well, and he's enjoying his retirement. So thank you for asking.
Okay, please send our love and hugs to him from this part of the world also, okay?
I absolutely will. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a beautiful day and enjoy, making your impacts. Thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you. It was an honor to spend time with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.